The content presented is for entertainment purposes only. Some content may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. So as parents, it's really important to protect children, not only from themselves as they're growing up until they can become old enough where they can take care of themselves, but also from all the other things and the fiery darts and the pronouns and the sex ed and everything else that's going on around them. So I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you think it's appropriate for schools to use certain pronouns for your children or their preferred pronouns at school? And should they leave you in the dark? Also, what the hell is colorblind casting? If you know, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on it. And I'm pretty sure Disney is not only getting woke, but it's also getting broke, as it is literally bleeding hundreds of millions of dollars. Hello, everybody. Jay Rhymes here with the Periodic Review. I hope you all are having an incredible day today. Let's go ahead and jump right in to these topics. So I want to talk a little bit about proof that your school teachers want to remove gender norms and teach about allow their kids to have gender pronouns. It's been a quite interesting article that I've been reading. This is over at learningforjustice.org. This is some writings from a teacher named Jeremy Knoll. Which has been really interesting to kind of see what some of these teachers are thinking about is okay to teach in school for children. So this is quoting from this article that this teacher wrote. So one student wrote about his performance in the school play when he was in 6th grade. He loved the process of rehearsals and the bond he formed with his castmates. He appreciated digging into his character, pretending to be someone else, telling a story and dressing the part. He liked using his imagination and the creative side of his personality. Then 7th grade came, and he learned some normative lessons. No girl is going to want to be with a guy who acts. Only gay kids act. And boys play sports. He could not fully articulate where these messages came from, expressing that the lessons were taught largely by his male peers, but also by girls in his class, male role models, family, and the media. What he was sure of is that he did not try out for the play in junior high despite having the lead in 6th grade. He did what he was told and played sports instead, becoming a good high school athlete. Still, he explained, he always found himself looking at the kids in plays with respect, admiration, and a lingering question: how would my life have been different? This has been a recurring theme in these seniors' reflections for years now. One boy keeps playing baseball despite hating it. Why? Because it is the only way his father tolerates his love for oil pastels. Another boy dumped his girlfriend because his friends had found a poem he wrote to her and ridiculed him for it. Another student, an athlete, bemoans the fact that he never told the guys in his locker room that he was uncomfortable with the way they objectify the girls they talk about. A member of the chamber choir talks about how difficult it was to connect with more normal boys, quote unquote. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about this because it's becoming more and more prevalent, not only in the higher academia, in colleges, community colleges, these, well-renowned, names in academia, but also it is bleeding over into grade schools. And I mean, we've actually found different articles where teachers are trying to teach children about sex, about gay, lesbian, bisexual, about trans, as early as like preschool, kindergarten, and beyond. And so it's been, I guess, a very interesting ride kind of watching these different things that are going on and just watching people kind of talk about it in the media, talk about it in the news, talk about social media, of course. Social media has kind of been the loudest blowhorn for these individuals to continue to say that it's okay to teach these things to kids, which in my opinion, it is not. Now, I grew up very prevalently in the 90s. Now, I didn't really know anything about trans individuals growing up in the 90s. The words and the terms that are being thrown around that time was obviously gays, with, same-sex attraction with men, lesbian, same-sex attraction with women, and bisexuals, which is, whatever fleets their fancy they can be attracted to at that time. This is what I understood growing up. And so it was just really interesting because even though like I knew and understand what these meant, and these kids kind of said that they quote unquote identified or said, hey, I'm gay, or hey, I'm bi, or hey, I'm lesbian, it really didn't matter to me growing up. I was just like, hey, you do you. If you're cool and I'm cool and we can still hang out and be friends, I really don't care. Had many gay friends, lesbian friends, bisexual friends, kids who didn't really identify with anything, and it was just kind of like one of those things, just like I really don't care. Just as long as we're cool and we can still be friends. Like, that's all I really cared about. And so I thought it was really interesting growing up in that time and just kind of being around these different things. I don't think it really affected me that much. It didn't really affect the way that I treated other people or the friends that I made. Like, I was, buddies and peers with, the jocks. I was peers and buddies with the metalheads, with the rockers, with the alternative rockers, the geeks, the nerds, some of the cheerleaders. Like, I kind of was peers with everybody. I wasn't like, I did have my core group of friends, which was, 4 of us kind of nerdier guys that like to play Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and talk about, elves and knights and warriors, and play World of Warcraft and Dark Age of Camelot, Diablo, like all these different things. So I really didn't care. I was just like, I was having fun hanging out with whoever was cool, and I was friends with a lot of people, and it really didn't matter to me too much about their sexuality. It didn't matter to me about their color, their skin, the way that they talk, if they cursed, if they didn't curse, if they were religious, if they were not. All I cared about was, hey, if you're cool, I'm cool, and we can move on with our lives and just enjoy our lives as kids. So kids should be encouraged to go into extracurricular activities they're interested in or even curious about. Many find favorites by trying them out. And so one of the points I thought was really interesting about this article was that these kids seemed like they were being forced into doing certain things. And if that's really the case, I mean, sometimes kids will just vent because they're frustrated. Sorry, I think my camera was a little cockeyed. And kids will vent, and they'll be upset, and they'll be pissed. And, when you're that teenager age, you want to be angsty and go against the grain of the authority, which is your parents, which is your teachers a lot of times. I mean, I think it's really interesting and kind of disingenuous when these teachers are like, oh no, these kids are coming to us and saying that they're victims and, of their sexuality and all this. And it's just like, you know what? It's not really your place. And so what's really interesting is that there's a lot of things that kids are interested in. Like whether they be in sports, whether they be in acting, whether they be in building trades. One of the things I was really big in growing up was I was into acting. So I did a lot of acting classes. I was in several different plays. I was in several mask and movement pieces, monologues. Some of it I was pretty good at. Some of it I wasn't very good at, and I just kind of did the best I could until I got through the end of whatever it was we were doing, until I got something that was a little bit more interesting. And I didn't feel like I really needed to worry about my sexuality growing up. I kind of knew who I was, and I just kind of acted the way I thought was appropriate to act, and with and around people. And I really enjoyed the arts. Like, I really enjoyed photography and media productions. And it was a real bummer because there was a big production that we were doing, and I think it was a junior at this time. I think it was the end of my junior year. And I was struggling in math. And so my mom was pretty upset, and she's like, look, if you can't get your grade up, you need to quit this production and just kind of focus on that, unfortunately. And so it got to the point where my grades were just so bad, I just had to politely tell my teacher, I'm really sorry, but I'm failing. I'm going to have to bounce out of this. I'm really sorry. And that was a bummer, but was really, I feel like I had pretty good parents, and they kind of encouraged me to do whatever it is that I wanted to do. If I felt like I wanted to go out for sports, I went out for sports. If I was done with sports and I wanted to do stuff more extracurricular in the point of like film and photography and acting and set building or whatever, I just kind of did whatever I thought was interesting, and they were very encouraging about it, which was actually really cool. Now, at some of the times when I was choosing to do these things, maybe I could say, oh, well, my parents were forcing me. Well, I mean, kids are very dramatic in in their angst. I wouldn't be very genuine if I said that. If a kid came up to me and said, "Oh, my parents are forcing me to do this," and to take that at face value, because kids are very dramatic. They're always talking about, "Oh, I'm gonna die if I don't get this new hair product, or if I don't see this new movie, or whatever." So I kind of take it with a grain of salt when a kid talks about I'm being forced to do something, unless you can see in evidence otherwise. However, I know that there are parents out there who are super duper very strict, and it's important for them to either live out their lives through the lives of their children by, forcing them into going into football or baseball or acting or film or whatever, because that's what they wanted to do when they were in high school and they didn't get a chance to do it. And so now they feel like they need to throw their kid into it. Like, I get it. Like, I get that there are some bad parents out there. But I think for the most part, like, parents are usually pretty good with their kids. And I think it's important that if the teachers are seeing some things where the kid, like, they're kind of worried about the kids, they really need to get their parents involved. They really need to not try to take it in their own hands. It's not really appropriate for them to do that. I really think it's more appropriate that they go, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, your kid came up to me today, talked to me how they felt like they were being forced into this kind of stuff. I just wanted to make sure that you had all the information that was given to me. I didn't proceed to anything. I referred them to you guys because you're their parents, and that's what's appropriate. And hope that everything works out. If you need anything, let me know. I'm willing to help with whatever we need to do. I think that's more appropriate than taking things in your own hands. I think educators need to be on point with educating. I think that it's important and more appropriate that they talk about specific, credible, objective truths, not trying to change the things that are going on in the world to their personal ideologies. I feel like politics and ideologies should be left at the door at schools before they enter the classroom, and they can pick them back up at the end of the day. I feel that way about the workplace as well. I feel it's more appropriate to be apolitical when it comes to business. I think it's inappropriate for businesses to try to push an ideology or to vocalize, on behalf of their business. On either side, I even feel like even when Chick-fil-A came out and said, "Oh, we're not going to work on Sundays because it's the Lord's Day," it's like, okay, like that's your prerogative, but it's not really appropriate to talk about that stuff. Just as much as it's not appropriate for different schools and stuff to come in and start talking about their personal ideologies and be like, "Hey, we're going to do this for these kids, and we're just going to take over, and parents be damned." Is it this teacher's job or duty to educate children on what is normal for boys and girls? I would probably say no. I feel like it's really the parent's job to try to figure out how the best way to teach a child at the appropriate age about sex, and how that is involved with a man and a woman, of appropriate age, of consenting age. Obviously, consent is really important. And that's something that needs to have be done with the parents. I really do feel that schools need to get out of the business of sex education and politics education. I really feel like they should be preparing these kids for the future as far as like, hey, once you turn the age of 16, you can start working, start saving up money so you can have a down payment to get out into an apartment or to bunk with a couple of other classmates when you guys move out of the house at 18. And prepare for college or to prepare for your next career, outside of that. Like, I think it's really important that we prepare kids for that kind of stuff. And I feel like not only do we need to teach kids, obviously, about history, I feel like history is really important to know and understand. I feel like economics, as dreary as it is, I think it's still important for kids to know and understand, as well as science, as long as all of these things are all objective and verifiable. With evidence is really important, not just teaching ideologies or trying to change the past or to change the information to make the historical alignings with your ideologies. I think that's still really inappropriate. But yeah, as far as it comes about, the differences for boys and girls and stuff, I really feel like that's really important that we leave that to the parents. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, that's another topic for another day. Because I'll be honest with you, I have met some people and I kind of question their parental abilities. But again, like, having had the opportunity to have a teenager in my house for like a year, it's not as easy as somebody would understand. And so, I understand there are be some crazy circumstances in there, especially when it comes to teenagers. If boys or girls are being forced into one sport or another art, that may be bad parenting. Even so, is it anyone else's place to pass judgment on said parents? No. It's not really my place to pass judgment, obviously. Obviously, when we talk and we hear of things like on social media or we listen on podcasts or whatever, it's not that that's the lay of the land. That's not what's going to happen. It's not like if Joe Rogan comes out and says, hey, my daughter's going to have an abortion and that's it, done. There's nothing you can do about it. Well, okay. Well, that's his thought and his opinion. That's what he's going to do. It's not like I can say something that would stop him from doing it if that's his right. And if that's what's according to the law that can be prepared and can be done, then that's what's going to happen. There's not much I can do to stop it. I can say my thoughts and feelings and opinions on one topic or another, but it doesn't mean it's the bottom line of what's going to happen. Although I'd love to save as many babies as possible. So what are some possible constructive, positive outcomes? I think the biggest thing is that teachers really need to know their place. Teachers need to know that they need to stay in their lane as an educator, speaking on objective truths as well as historical truths, and they should keep their thoughts and their feelings and opinions outside of the classroom, because in the classroom it's not appropriate, number one. Number two, it's also not appropriate for them to talk about sex. It's not appropriate for them to talk about sexual identities or pronouns or whatever the case may be. It's not appropriate for teachers to do that. And that should be deferred to the parents at all costs. They shouldn't give their opinions on it. They shouldn't try to encourage or indoctrinate, or as some may say, or it could be construed as grooming children into thinking certain ways. It's not appropriate for the classroom at any level, at any grade. Period. That's my line. That's my line with educators. So there is a school out in Ohio who think it's okay to keep parents' knowledge of their children's use of preferred pronouns at school and keep these parents in the dark. And I think that's disgusting. I think it's gross. And again, you could construe that as possible grooming behavior. Now, it doesn't mean that, if these individuals are pedos or not, like even the behavior could be construed as grooming children. And I think when it comes to talking about sex in any shape or form, especially around students and their teachers, I don't think it's appropriate. I mean, I know that there's sex ed classes, and I get it. You know, they have like certain people come in and talk about it. But really, I don't really think they should even do that. I don't think they should have like programs for them to do that. I think that the parents should instill that information, that knowledge, and bestow it to their children. I don't think it's appropriate for schools to be in that kind of business. So I'm going to share these quotes from this particular article. So that teacher can just use those preferred pronouns and name with the student, and there is no need to share the info with any other staff member or family member unless the student would like additional support with this throughout the year, the email read. My statement regarding the parent communication piece was in response to a singular scenario about a singular high school student approaching a singular teacher about using their preferred pronouns in the classroom, he continued. They did not want to change them in Infinite Campus or Google because the parents would need to be involved, and they were not ready to have that conversation with their family. In this situation, we're now moving out of the pronoun survey question, and we're now moving on to the transgender student rights question. This is a significantly different topic. My statement goes back to the singular scenario and was made to follow the regulations about a protected class of people based on federal regulations. What was really interesting is that it kind of goes on, and this is actually during a school meeting, or like some kind of board meeting, or like some kind of town hall meeting or something, where they were kind of like allowing the public to come in and talk and everything. And I thought it was really interesting because these teachers think it's okay to treat these children as if they're adults. And that's not appropriate. I don't think it's appropriate for these teachers to talk to these children like they have a say before they're 18 of what they can or cannot do, or how they should be referred to as. And I think it's important that when these children come to these teachers and say, oh, hey, I learned this cool thing on TikTok. I want to be referred to as a frog, and I want to go ribbit every time I want during class. And actually, there was an article that I read ways back, and I even talked about this in another podcast episode, where I think this was in places in California, which makes sense, of course, because it's a very libertarian, very Democrat, very hard left-leaning, very radicalized, and allowing these children to identify as whatever they want, and they can have outbursts according to how they feel, which is nonsense. Now, it's not to say that children don't have feelings, because obviously children still get mad, they still get sad, they still get happy, they still get depressed and bummed out. But this is the thing that's really interesting about transgender individuals. And I think, I can't remember the exact quote. It was from a doctor that was on a Joe Rogan podcast, who talked about the only time he's ever seen someone believe something that they are not and refuse to take any input from anybody else. And not only that, continues to tell people that they need to believe what they say that they are, is in children. And I thought that was really interesting, because children look around and be like, I'm a dinosaur. Rawr! And as a parent, you go, you're not a dinosaur. You're a little boy. You need to stop that. You're being silly. And it is silly. And I'm still hard pressed to kind of figure out and understand, like, with these individuals who I believe are trying to be career victims, in my opinion. I feel like they've been fed this garbage and been told that, oh yeah, you can be a victim the rest of your life and you can control how other people act around you. I think it's more about power rather than, oh, I actually am a boy and I really want to be a girl. or vice versa. I'm going to divulge here a little bit. So I did a TikTok video, and it was just kind of like talking about how I would approach somebody if they were on my podcast, if I met them in real life, or like I have a friend who I grew up childhood with, from grade school all the way up through, past high school, and beyond. We've lost touch because I got married and moved, about 8 years ago or so. And he's now transitioned. He has a new name. He has new pronouns now. And I talked about how I would address that. And if it was my childhood friend, or if it was Blair White, or any of these other individuals who I'm communicating with, yeah, I'm going to call him a her or a she. I can do that. I mean, it's going to be kind of difficult, especially if it's somebody I grew up around. That's going to be kind of difficult for me. But I think I could get to the point where I could do that. If they want to be called Tina instead of Tommy, I could probably do that. And I think that would be in best interest to do so with these particular individuals. The only thing is that if they really got down to the brass tacks and to the to everything that's at hand, if they ask me my opinion and my thoughts, I'm still going to tell them my opinion and my thoughts. If they're like, hey, I know we grew up around each other, and I was a man, and now I feel like I'm a woman, and I want to be referred to as a woman, but what are your thoughts on that? And do you think I'm a real woman? I would say no. You are a human male. But I'm still willing, and I feel like you need some help, but I'm still willing to refer to you as whatever, makes you feel more comfortable in that moment. I feel like that's the nice thing to do. And I got a little bit of hate on it, and it's because I said the reverse pronouns instead of the opposite pronouns, because, words I'm not very good at. I just thought it was really interesting. I got some flack over that. But anyway, so it seems to me that there is a battle of control for children. So on one hand, the government thinks that they know what's best, for these children. The radical left and these liberals feel like they know what's best for these children. And then there's the parents who are trying their damnedest to stop these different things that are coming at their children and to help them navigate through it. And these kids, they should just be focusing on being kids and having fun and, getting good grades in school. Like, why would they have to, and playing video games or whatever, or playing volleyball or basketball or baseball or acting, or, doing a film and photography or building trades. Like, they shouldn't have to worry about sexuality. They shouldn't have to worry about, these different pronouns and like, oh, well, maybe I'm gay or lesbian or bisexual or maybe I'm a she, her, him, they, zezer, zomzo, and let's confuse children more so that honestly, this is my tinfoil hat I'm putting on right now. My aluminum foil hat is on right now. I think, honestly, this is not really about sexuality. It's not really about sex education. It's not really about pronouns. I think what it's really about is control. And he who has control, takes over the world. Just my 2 cents worth. So this seems that grade schools, colleges, and beyond want to keep people in victim mentality and make more dependence on the government as they think they know best. And what the problem is that when they think that they know best and they will do everything in their power to take it over, this is the kind of stuff we get. And unfortunately, this is kind of out of the fascist playbook, is to take away our rights, rights away from our children. Like there's even cases in different places in Europe where children are literally being taken away from parents because they refuse to use their preferred pronouns or to put them on puberty blockers or to start to transition them as far as like going under the knife and get these reassignments. And honestly, it doesn't really matter how well you cosplay. It doesn't really matter how many operations you get. If you're born as a biological male, you are a man. If you are born as a biological girl, you will become a woman. And that's just the facts of life. And I think it's really interesting that we're placating and like trying to divulge in these delusions of grandeur that people can be otherwise. And I think people like Ben Shapiro, I think people, like Joe Rogan, I think people that have these, big platforms and big voices are really saying the more sane and the more reasonable things. And it's this chaos and this distrust that it's being, levied for power on the left, in my opinion. So doesn't the radical left, Democrats, and Biden administration, because I believe they're all culpable as well, what the world would be dependent on them? I think I had a thought there and I had a good question there. And I think I wrote it improperly. So we'll just move on from that one. So if they are successful, so let's say the radical left and the liberals, they are successful in brainwashing the majority of these children, these college graduates, and they go out into the world and they get into business and they get into film and they get into social media and big tech corporates. And they brainwash them to the point where they're into this victim mentality, like career victims, and they become not only dependent on that thought process, but also on the government. Wouldn't that grant them ultimate power over these people? And I would have to say, yeah, I think that is what's going to happen. If they continue to do this and people continue to go down these like ideologies and this sex stuff, like this is all out of the fascist playbook. I think there's literally I don't know if it's the anarchist playbook, but there's like a playbook. I think it was like from the Russians or something. And like one of the things was to create division with political parties, create division when it comes to sexuality, differences between men and women. Like, I feel like I can't think of this right off the top of my head or where I read this at, or maybe it was an article or something, but I believe there is a book that literally it's about Marxism. Excuse me. It was like the playbook of Marxism and how to destroy like a country. And I don't remember if it was like solely targeted at America, but it seemed like it was definitely targeted at like at least, countries like America. And I think what's really interesting is that we could come together even in our differences as Americans and say, hey, you know what? We may disagree on the thought processes of what is gender and what is sex. We may disagree on what is a marriage and what is a union. Is it man and wife? Is it two men? Is it two women? Is it okay or not okay? Or maybe we create new words. Maybe instead of marriage, we call it a civil union or whatever the case may be. We could still come together and say, hey, we have these differences, but we don't want to destroy this country, and looking at all the things that are going on, especially the lies coming from this current administration and the shenanigans that's going on and the current inflation and the printing of money and the outrageous spending that's going on, creating inflation, not opening up pipelines, like closing down, like drilling offshore, like not renewing pumping on American soil, like not doing leases for that. It's like, when does it end? Does it end when it all collapses and then we have to try to build from the ground up? Why don't we make minor adjustments? I don't know. I could be wrong. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Today's video episode is sponsored by viewers like you, so thank you. If we earned your subscription today, don't forget to hit that red subscribe button, click that damn bell, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss a content release. The best way to support the channel is to share your favorite share your favorite video, crush that like button, and leave a comment down below. Send all your topic ideas, articles, and video links to theperiodicreview@gmail.com. If you missed yesterday's live stream, the Periodic Review podcast is now free on Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook. All of our links are in the description down below. So welcome back to the show. Excuse me. So, moving on from the school section, and let's talk a little bit about entertainment. Because there's been kind of some very pivotal shifts that have been happening in the entertainment world, both in film and in TV. And I've kind of seen it. I feel like we've kind of hit our peak somewhere, and you could probably say this about music as well. But I kind of feel like we hit our peak somewhere around, I want to say early mid 2000s, maybe 2010s. Like we kind of hit our peak. And somewhere around then, somewhere around where, these individuals that have been, I believe personally, brainwashed, put into that victim mentality thought process, put into, these radical left ideologies, the liberal ideologies. And these individuals are now producers, they're now directors, they're actors, they're running large corporate companies. They are now running and directing the big tech, big media, as well as taking over all of the airwaves when it comes to mainstream media, quote unquote, mainstream media. I like to call it corporatized media. And what's been really interesting is that this is a new word I've learned. And I love learning new stuff and learning new words, but this is quite the most interesting word I've learned as of late. And this word is called colorblind casting. And I think just the name itself is kind of disingenuous, but let's jump into this. So colorblind casting, also referred to as non-traditional casting, integrated casting, or blind casting, is the practice of casting without considering the actor's ethnicity, skin color, body shape, sex, and or gender. A representative of the Actors Equity Association is disputed the use of the term colorblind, referring to the definition non-traditional casting. Non-traditional casting is defined as the casting of ethnic minority actors in roles where race, ethnicity, or gender is not germane. Race reversed casting is one form of non-traditional casting. So like for instance, if we're going to go ahead and play this, where you're doing a Pocahontas live action film, but instead of casting a Native American or an indigenous person, as they like to call it now. Apparently we need new names for everything, even though we have names for everything. That I digress. And then putting a Latino person in the place. So that would be non-traditional casting. Makes sense, right? All right, so I quote from this wonderful article from thecrimson.com. You'd be hard-pressed to encounter someone who isn't familiar with Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda's critically acclaimed musical about United States founding father Alexander Hamilton, a Broadway production deemed so sensational that a full recording of the original cast performance was released on Disney+. Hamilton is a cultural phenomenon that challenges the ubiquity of whitewashing in American theater by selecting BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, actors to play white historical figures. So basically race washing all of the white leaders of the country, basically. That's how I read it. I mean, I could be misunderstanding. I'm sure you guys will let me know. But the progressiveness reflected in this radical diversity, which fans and critics alike celebrate, is also a source of controversy. I wonder why. Is Hamilton really that innovative if it fundamentally engages in an absurd form of racism known as colorblind casting? See, this is what I think is interesting, because I feel like people are misunderstanding racial in nature versus racist in nature. Because Like, let's say you're the director and you're working with the casting person and the producers and stuff, and you're going to be casting for the next film of Roots. Let's say you're going to redo Roots. This was starring Oprah Winfrey and other well-known black actors. And instead of casting black Americans, you decide to cast anyone else but black Americans, because non-traditional casting, because colorblind casting. That wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't be, especially if you're going off of historical accuracy when it comes to biopic, when it comes to biographical. I think it's really important that, like, for instance, if you're going to cast George Washington probably won't be a black person. Not to say that that's bad. It is racial in nature, but it's not inherently racist in nature. And I think that's something that especially these very loud individuals on their blowhorns on Twitter and Facebook and other social media networks, basically calling everything racist if you disagree with them, is that if you're going to call out racism, it needs to be objectively racist. Like, and that's really important to me. All right, let's read on. So those who deny the whitewashing prompted by colorblind casting may reinforce their convictions by contending that an actor's role is to assume identities different from their own, even in terms of race. After all, one of the key tenets of the art form is what poet and aesthetic philosopher Samuel Taylor Coleridge, I probably said that wrong, coined as the willing suspension of disbelief. Audience members are expected to submit to the world of the production, no matter how unrealistic it may be. Yet it hardly seems appropriate to equate, I can't read today, matters of racial identity with, say, a willing suspension of disbelief, requiring which a man turns into a scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. And I think that's really interesting because in The Wizard of Oz, although in the original, it was a white guy playing, the scarecrow that becomes a man, or gets a brain, the scarecrow was just a scarecrow. I mean, that could be genderless. That would make sense. I mean, it's a fantasy world. It's a fantasy telling of this wonderful classic. Yeah, I could see a different sex or even a different race playing in that role. But let's talk about stuff that is made in fantasy, but has a lot of references and a lot of writings and a lot of information where you can understand where the races are different, where the sexes are different. And I think Lord of the Rings, I think J.R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones, I think these are very definitive in their books. The canonized information with these fantasy worlds are very very focused and very well known, the different races, the different sexes of these different individuals that are within these. So it'd be like taking Galadriel and casting her as a man. Like, that wouldn't make any sense if you were redoing the Lord of the Rings, or let's say this new series that's out, Rings of Power. They decided to gender bender Elrond or something. I don't think the fans would really take well to that, considering that there's a wealth of knowledge, there's a wealth of writings to continue to understand who these people are, what race they are, what sex they are. And that's really important to the fans. And I think it's a disservice to the fans to change that too much. But I digress. Okay, so I'm a little behind here, so I'm going to go ahead and jump over to our last topic of the day. Disney goes woke as revenue plummets, while Little Mermaid 2023 teaser gets roasted. in the comments. So I'm really excited to read these comments because they're freaking hilarious. So I'm going to youtube.com and we're going to search for Little Mermaid official teaser. This has now been viewed by over 15 million people. 15 million views, I guess I should say. I'm sure people have watched it multiple times, especially passing it around. So we'll get to that in just a moment. So the Post-Millennial says the Walt Disney Company revealed that revenues are down more than 636 million in the second quarter of 2021 as compared to the first. So if that isn't a classic get woke, go broke, like coming into fruition in reality, I don't know what is. And judging by the films that have come out, I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, like that I've been viewing, not only from Pixar, but from Marvel, Sony, some of the stuff from Sony that are involved with Disney and Disney films in general, have really adopted this woke ideology, and they're really trying to force inclusion where it doesn't need to be forced. They're forcing different races and identities and sex stuff in their films. And it's really showing that the fan base and the fandom are not appreciating it because more and more people are not going and seeing their movies. At least the vast majority of the movies. I think their last biggest movie that came out was Spider-Man Far From Home, and they were in association with Sony. So it was kind of like a Sony Marvel kind of thing. So it is feeling like Disney films are now a meme. Like as they try to apologize for their white guilt by changing virtually all of the original castings from white to anything else, I really do feel like they are apologists and they're not thinking of their fans. They're not thinking of just creating good stories with good characters. And if they want to utilize different races or sexes, they just need to create other films and movies. I think, what was it? Reyna, the Last Dragon, or Reyna what was it called? Doggone it. Reyna and the Last Dragon. Okay, so I was close. Reyna and the Last Dragon. I thought that was a really great example of incorporating, the fairer sex in a very strong, very pivotal and centric role. Also ethnic. And bringing in all these other people to work on this particular film in the background, because obviously it's all voiceovers and stuff. I think that's a great example of doing a good film with the fairer sex, with an ethnicity that isn't white. Like, I think you can do this in a good way, just like I feel like you can do this in a good way for same-sex couples and same-sex marriage and stuff like that. I feel like I keep going back to Schitt's Creek, where that relationship on that show that blossoms and grows was probably the best example of portraying, gay, bi individuals in a way that tells a good story and has great characters. Not just, 3 seasons later, surprise, there's something else than what they started out to be. That doesn't work. Like, you got to start with it. And you also got to be at least genuine to say, hey, this is going to be our film. It's going to be very centric on the LBGT. It's going to be very centric on, anybody that's not white. Okay, great. So then that'll placate to the people that want to go see it, and the people that don't want to go see it don't have to watch it and have to be obsessed about how it wasn't good for them. I think it's really silly to try to slip stuff in and try to be sneaky about it. It's like, be open and honest. Just say, hey, we want to make this film. It's going to be super inclusive. And, if you want to see it, great. If not, no, don't. I think that's a great way to do it. And Disney also has been caught with their pants down. as the producers, directors, and others involved with their films are championing same-sex couples, kisses, and love scenes in their movies and TV series, being as far away from child-friendly as possible. And I think that's really something that's been really disingenuous about Disney, especially over the last 10 years at least, where it doesn't seem as family-friendly and child-friendly as they used to be. Now they're getting more into politics and woke ideologies. And now instead of saying, hey, welcome to Disneyland, boys and girls, they say, welcome to Disney, everyone. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying boys and girls, because that's what they are, boys and girls. I don't know. It's just silly to me. So Disney is more worried about inclusion than talent. And that's what sucks, because Disney used to be a force of good and just making family friendly, child fun, like videos and TV series. And now they're just more worried about their politics and ideologies. And it's really, really sad. So when Disney puts inclusion and diversity over talent and profits, will this ultimately work in the end? My thoughts are no. Probably a perfect example is how the radical left and the libertarians on CNN have been pushing very, very hard their left-leaning ideologies, as well as doing everything they possibly can to blame everything on Trump. Now, again, like if you've actually watched and listened to these different podcasts, you know that I'm not a lover of Trump. Like, I think he did a really great job when it came to economic and business things, except for some things where it was profits over people, which I don't agree with. But for the most part, like, gas was low, business was booming, almost everybody had a job. And it's terrible when they just got to do everything they possibly can to blame him for everything. And so CNN is a really great example, because the CNN numbers have been abysmal for the last, who knows how long. And it's really interesting because just recently, the company has changed hands, and now they're trying to go for a more objective, more centristic view on things. And I've kind of seen that over the past couple of weeks, where since this person has come on, they're actually being more objective in their telling of things, rather than being subjective and having a purpose to destroy certain people, certain thought processes, and certain political groups. And honestly, I have to take my hat off and say, good job. Like, if they start going to that point where they're going to be more an objective news outlet, I think that'll be great overall. I don't know if it'll save them in the end. And I don't know if it'll save them in the end for Disney either. So if Disney finally gets to the point where they get that fire under their butts and they realize, oh, our last 10 movies didn't make any money. We're having trouble paying the bills and keeping the lights on over at Epcot Center. Maybe we should dial this woke ideology back a little bit. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the future. So how can we decide what is best for our kids when activism is focusing on children from all sides? I think the best thing to do is to find out what your children are consuming, as far as what are they watching on YouTube? What are they watching on TikTok? What are they like? Be involved and talk to your kids and be like, hey, what are you watching lately? What questions do you have about life? What are you confused about? And then obviously talking to the teachers and the principal at your school and be like, hey, if anything is out of, what is normal, let me know so I can decide what's best for my kid. Like, absolutely don't make decisions for me. That would be another thing that's really important. And I think it's really important that parents take the time, not only talk to their kids and find out what their interests are and really help cultivate and encourage them to go into those things. But I think it's also important to, sit in classrooms and listen to the teachers. What are they talking about? Are they pushing critical race theory? Are they talking about sexual education out of, the prescribed, sex ed classes that they do at the appropriate time and the appropriate age. Maybe you decide not to do that and you say, hey, I will talk to my kid about this stuff. Don't talk to him about it. Definitely be involved in knowing what films they have to watch, what movies or like clips from YouTube they have to consume in order for class, books they have to read. That way you kind of know what's going on. I think that's really important. I think if we still had our teenager, unfortunately, went back into the system, unfortunately, very troubled kid, miss him every day. But focusing on the kids, encouraging these companies, these large, huge tech giants, to focus on creating good products and services that are void of ideologies, that are void of sex education, that are void of these leanings politically. And I think in the end, parents have to do their due diligence to protect their kids. So if you've made it this far, hopefully we've earned your subscription today. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're still trying to figure out exactly when and where we can get together with the different things that are going on. In the month of October, it's a really tough one for my wife, not only on the school front, but also work front. My good buddy, he just had a big change in his schedule, and so he's out much later in the evening, and so weekdays are not as good for him. I don't know where that leaves us as far as like the periodic review crew. It may be me doing solo videos and podcasts for a while. I don't know what the future brings, but I will do my best, to bring out content for you guys each week. I just don't have a specific date and time, just a kind of, whatever day I have the time to spend 2 or 3 hours, for preparing, for getting ready, and then actually doing the podcast. And hopefully it turns out well for you guys. And then just definitely let us know if we're on the right track. If there's different topics you want to talk on or hear your thoughts on, those are always very helpful. As well as just encouraging, life gets busy, life gets tough. And when it does get tough, when it gets hard, I think it's important to remember what our purpose is. And our purpose is to learn and to grow. As parents, your purpose is to protect. As husband and wife, your purpose is to provide. These are things that are very, very important in life, especially as human beings, that date back to whether you believe in creationism or you believe in Darwinism. We've at least had these certain roles for thousands of years, if not tens of millions. And to decide now to change them doesn't help with continuity. It doesn't help with ensuring that we are going to be the human race, in years to come. But with that being said, I really would love to hear your all's thoughts on these particular topics, So what are your thoughts on, specific teachers, removing, gender norms and like teaching kids about sex education outside of the prescribed educational mediums? What are your thoughts on this particular high school in Ohio, where they keep parents in the dark? So without any knowledge of their children deciding that they want preferred pronouns, or they want to identify as non-binary, or they want to identify as lesbian or gay, or your little boy wants to now identify as a little girl, or vice versa. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Like, is that good? Is that bad? Where are you guys at on this? And what the hell? Colorblind casting? That's got to be the silliest term like I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, what are your thoughts on casting when it comes to when it comes to biographical information, when it comes to history. And then what is your thoughts on casting in, in like fantasy worlds? Whether you have information on or not. And lastly, where are you at on Disney? I'm like so done. I am so done supporting Disney in anything nowadays. I just feel like they're the most disingenuous and the most radicalized studio out there right now. And unfortunately, it's bleeding into these other studios. I don't think it's as bad on Amazon Prime. I think it's getting worse on Netflix, unfortunately. And there's a lot of series that I really enjoy. And I hope I don't have to give up Netflix, because I've already given up Disney Plus and I've given up on Star Wars. I might be giving up on Lord of the Rings as we try to watch the Rings of Power. It's just not been great. It's been very slow and characters aren't not that interesting, and maybe it's a casting problem. Maybe they needed to cast different people. And it's not even who you think. I mean, actually the Arenduin, the elf that's been in the controversial light, I think he's the most elvish out of all of the elves in the cast, in my opinion. But anyways, that's my thoughts. Those are my feelings. These are my opinions. Thank you all so much for watching another video. I really do appreciate it. From my family to yours, good night. Hello everyone, Jay Rhymes with the Periodic Review. Today's video is sponsored by viewers like you, so thank you. Hopefully we've earned your subscription today, so don't forget to click that subscribe button and hit that damn bell to turn on your notifications so you don't miss a content release. Check out the video links at the end of every video to view our previous content, as well as visit the description section for more links to enjoy. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and from my family to yours, good night.